evening, we are talking ethical leadership. We will unpack what the term means, and tonight in particular, through the lens of the Christian faith. We are honored to welcome Reverend Pastor Mathebula of Hope Restoration Ministries to lead us in this discussion. The Webster Dictionary defines ethics as a rules of behavior based on ideas about what is morally good and bad, or a belief that something is very important. We will discuss the place and value of ethics in our contemporary world and how a nation such as ours goes about negotiating a shared ethical code. This webinar takes the shape of a roundtable dialogue to allow both panelists to ask one another questions should they wish to do so. Furthermore, viewers who may wish to pose further questions can do so using the chat function. For members of the media who may be joining us this evening, a high-resolution recording of these proceedings can be made available upon request. Without further ado, as this promises to be a jam-packed discussion, I invite the President of Action SA and convener of this webinar, Mashaba, to start us off by delivering his opening remarks. Let us please welcome President Mashaba. Mr. Mashaba, you are on mute. Great, we have you now, Mr. Mashaba. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, and sorry for not unmuting me on time. Thank you, Loratu, and good evening, South Africa, and all of you who are joining us this evening at this very important webinar. A special word of welcome to Reverend Matibula from Hope Restoration Ministries. I appreciate you, Reverend, for making the time to join us this evening to engage us on this very, very important topic. We are really graced by your presence, Reverend. This evening, fellows South Africans, we are launching a series of webinars devoted to the topic of ethical leadership. Action SA, we believe that the lack of ethical leadership is central to many, if not all, of the South African challenges we face as a country. Indeed, South Africa is being held back by unethical leaders and unqualified public servants. Daily, we are faced with examples in both the public sector and private sector of leaders who lack a moral compass and are instead guided by their self-interest. This leadership crisis has manifested through rampant corruption, cronyism, nepotism, and illogical cadre deployment that have crippled our country's public service. The systemic process of capturing the state has eroded state institutions and abandoned the once revered concept and principle of Ubuntu, a principle on which the formation of our new nation at the beginning of our democratic project is based. The decay of ethical leadership has also made many South Africans emotionally insensitive to issues of corruption and criminality, which have become normalized. We as South Africans cannot accept this. Our elected representatives should be the flag bearers of our constitution and be held at the highest of ethical standards. Yet, we are left debating their constitutional delinquency and whether they will face the consequences of their actions. These fellow South Africans must change. Rebuilding ethical leadership in South Africa must be at the core of the project to fix our country, South Africa, we so much love. That is why Action SA has made ethical leadership one of our core values and appointed an independent chief leadership officer to ensure that we embody this value as an organization. Against this context, over the coming weeks, we will be engaging with representatives of major faiths in South Africa to explore the role that religion can play in promoting a culture of ethical leadership. Statistics South Africa estimates that approximately 90% of South Africans follow some form of religion. I accept that South Africa is a secular state in terms of our constitution, which secures the rights of all South Africans to choose whatever they believe. This right like all other rights and freedoms we enjoy, ensures that the diversity of South Africa is protected. I personally believe that religion plays an important role in guiding tens of millions of South Africans and serves as a moral compass to many of our people. While I'm personally a Christian, over many years of engaging members of other faiths, I've come to appreciate that as much as there are fundamental differences in what we believe, we also share many similarities. The similarities are what we want to explore over the coming weeks, starting this evening with Reverend Matibula representing the Christian faith. This series will conclude with a webinar featuring our independent Chief Leadership Officer, Mr. Adrian Groenewald, who will explore the role of ethical leadership in building an inclusive, prosperous South Africa more broadly. On that note, I'd like to hand back to Lerato to facilitate the balance and the rest of the discussion. I thank you, South Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashaba, for those remarks. And now I call to the stage, to the podium, our honored guest, Reverend S.C. Mathebula, to also give us his opening remarks and talk to us about what he thinks about this important topic.
Thank you so much, Lerato. My greetings to Ndate Mashaba, Herman Mashaba, and to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed tonight. It's such an honor for me to be invited and to come and contribute under this powerful and really packed topic, ethical leadership, and which I would love to start right there based on my definition or the function of ethical leadership. I define ethical leadership, as leading sacrificially to better the lives of others. I want you to grab that because we're gonna come back to that. I'm reminded of a story tonight. It was in 1942, during winter of World War II, Hitler's armies were blockading Leningrad, which is Russia. The story tells us that no one went in and no one went out, and millions of people were starving to death. And the story goes on to say 12 Soviet scientists were surrounded, listen, they were surrounded by tons of genetically modified seeds they were tasked to preserve for future generations. Now, these people, no one was allowed to come in, no one was allowed to go out, and people were starving, including these 12 scientists who were surrounded, by these seeds, which it was a seed of rice, seed of wheat, corn, potatoes, in a huge seed bank. And Alexander Skuchkin, which was a Russian man, together with his colleagues, you know what they did? They chose to starve and die in the midst of plenty, ensuring that the future generation would be able to eat. These are the people in the midst of plenty, but they decided to die, than to eat the seed that was supposed to be preserved for the next generation. That, to me, it is what I call sacrifice worth making. You see, ethical leadership is about sacrifice. Nothing great in life will ever be established without a sacrifice. Unfortunately, as leaders, often we prefer an easy and a simple way of doing things. Naturally, we love shortcuts, quick success. You'd realize today, you can ask young people, what is the quickest way, of getting successful? They will tell you, I want to be a politician, because over a night, I can have a lot of millions, because there are no ethics anymore, especially when it comes to most of the politicians. Listen to me, failing to realize that nothing great ever comes for free. This is what is troubling us as human beings. Everything has its price in life, and nothing that was discovered and built was without a sacrifice. Let me give you some few examples. a light bulb was a sacrifice. We know that Thomas Edison failed 999 times before he could get it right. This is what I call ethical persistence or leadership. Building a railway line, so that people could travel by train was a sacrifice. It never happened over a night. Building a plane so that people could travel faster was a sacrifice for the Wright brothers. It is a simple thing to build a car so that you can test it, to check if it's in a good condition. But it's a different thing to build an aeroplane and to test that machine that everything is in a good shape, because you can lose your life while you are testing the thing. That is sacrifice. Bringing gold into the surface is a sacrifice. Many people have died so that the gold can be brought into the surface. Freedom was a sacrifice. Many people died and many went to prison because they believed, in some values that people, they are supposed to be equal and they must be treated equal. That is ethical leadership right there. And listen to me, South Africa tonight. Building a new and a better South Africa for all will require sacrifice. Mahatma Gandhi, he picked up what I call 7 deadly sins of this generation. He called this 7 deadly sins. He says, number 1, the sins of this generation is that, number 1, wealth without work. He says we have a generation that wants a lot of wealth, but they don't want to work for it. Number 2, he says the sin of this generation, it is pleasure without conscience. People, they want to continue to have pleasure, but there's no conscience. Number 3, he says the sin of this generation, it is knowledge without character. When you look at the people, they've got a lot of knowledge, they are educated, but when you look at them, there's no character. And then number 4, he says business without morality. People, they are more concerned now about making money, about making profit, at the expense of life. They are not even, interested if people, they lose their lives as long as they make a commission. That is the problem. Number 5, he talks about science without humanity. And then number 6, he says politics without principles. And then the last one, he says religion without sacrifice, because there's no religion without sacrifice. There's no cause without sacrifice. He says these are the sins, of this generation. I don't have time to talk about science without humanity, because today people, they can come up with something. I don't even know how this virus started. I don't want to get into that, but I'm telling you, there are people, behind the scenes who are benefiting from this. But all that I've discovered in life, that if you are a leader and you must be honored at the end of the day, I've discovered that in life, we admire those who make great sacrifices. We honor those who make great sacrifices. We set in stone those who make great sacrifices. You cannot demand a stone to be laid for you just because you have been a leader. But people, they will set in stone because you have made sacrifices. We reward those who make great sacrifices. We seek to emulate those who make great sacrifices. But because we don't have much time for tonight, let me just speak about 5 qualities, of an ethical leader or of ethical leadership. I strongly believe that, ethical leaders, they refuse the status quo. They refuse the status quo. What does that mean? Refusing the status quo simply means saying no to the current situation, the way things are now. So ethical leaders, when things are going astray, they don't just hide behind the scene and accept the way things they are. But you know what they do? They rise to the occasion. They confront the status quo and say, we cannot accept things to remain the way they are. Number two, what I've realized about ethical leaders is that they choose the road less traveled. They choose the road less traveled. And choosing the road less traveled simply means, freeing yourself from the conformity of others, and living a new trail that will become the road, more often. Can I read that again? When I'm talking about choosing, the road less traveled, that simply means you free yourself, from the conformity of others. You don't conform, and follow the group. But all that you do, you choose a new way of thinking. You choose a new way of doing things so that at the end of the day, as an ethical leader, you leave a new trail that will become a road more often. People, they look at you, they say, this is the man that we can follow. Your children, they look at you and say, this is the way we're gonna follow our Father. You don't just speak, but you act. Your actions, they speak louder than your words. That is what I call ethical leadership. I want to say, you must refuse what you are not. You must refuse, because in the world that we are living in, people will define us or will try to dent us, will try to buy our character. They will try to keep you silent as an ethical leader. But I'm saying to you, ethical leaders, they refuse what they are not. But you will never refuse what you are not until you know who you are. That is a topic for another day. If you don't know who you are, you will follow the group. Number three, ethical leaders, you know what they do? They embrace the future. They embrace the future. What does that mean? They live with the future in mind. Just like the story of those 12 scientists, when they were faced with hunger, and they had an opportunity of eating those seeds, they said, we're not gonna compromise the next generation. We will rather die and preserve the seed for the next generation. I don't know how many of you and then have visited Woolworths to buy some seedless grapes. I want to tell you that seedless grapes, they were not created by God. They were created by people, because everything that God created comes with the seed, so that whatever you eat, you don't eat everything. You must put the seed aside so that you plant that and for the next generation, because life, it is not about you. It is about the next generation. But listen to me. Today, we have produced what I call seedless grape leaders. You know what they do? They eat the grapes and also eat the seeds. They don't think about the next generation. If they are in power, if they are in position, all that they want to do, they think about themselves. They think about their children. They think about what is surrounding them, but not the next generation. Those are not ethical leaders. But ethical leaders, they think about the next generation. You know what they do? They plant, oak trees today. And they understand that it takes 100 years for an oak tree to mature. And then when it matures, I'm not going to be there. But I am so happy that the next generation will enjoy the shade and the wood of oak tree. All that I have done, it was to plant an oak tree, not for me, but for the next generation. Those are the ethical, leaders. Number four, you know what they do? The ethical leaders, they live with the sense of agency, and living with the sense of agency simply means that you don't have time to make excuses. When you have been given an opportunity, to serve, you serve with the sense of agency, because there's no more time to waste. We are living in the season where things are happening very fast. And the moment you postpone and say, I'm not going to do it today, I'm going to do it tomorrow, you might lose an opportunity. And final quality that I can put for tonight because of time is that ethical leaders, they give up temporary for eternal. They think about the next generation again. They are willing to give up immediate gratification for permanent impact. because they understand it is not about, immediate gratification, but it's about a permanent impact. I don't know those of you who know very well history, who are used to, especially church history. There's a man by the name of Jonathan Edwards, as I close my remarks tonight, by the name of Jonathan Edwards, a profound man that ever lived in this world. He was born in 1703. He died in 1758. This man only lived for 55 years. He was the only boy out of 11 children in his family. He was born the same year with a man that probably most of us we know by the name of John Wesley, and at the age of 13, this young man, he devoted his life, to serve the Lord, to serve in the temple, or to serve the church or God's people. At the age of 17, he studied theology. In 1730, don't miss this, he brought what we call a moral, and the spiritual awakening in America those days. And when he died, and then in 1900, somebody in 1900, remember he died in 1758, but by the year 1900, somebody wanted to check the impact this man made. And this is what they've discovered about Jonathan Edwards, is that his children and descendants included the following: 13 college presidents, 65 professors, 100 lawyers, 3 judges, 3 US senators, 1 USA president, 66 physicians, 135 editors, 1 publisher, over 100 overseas missionaries, over 100 philanthropists. And the most powerful thing about the story of this man is that his descendants cost the government not a single cent. This is the story of Jonathan Edwards. When he was no more, he was remembered by the impact that he has made. He built doctors, lawyers. The future was better because of him. All that I'm saying as I close my remarks is that true leaders, they make the place a better place while they are still alive. And when they are no more, the place becomes better and better. And to me, those are ethical leaders that we need. People who will think about the next generation, not consuming everything like those seedless grapes. You eat them and you cannot even trace anything. We don't need those type of leaders in this country, but we need leaders who will leave an impact. I thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Reverend Matibula. You gave us so much food for thought. And I could go on, and we probably need another hour to continue, but I will not do that. I just want to start off our conversation and ask Mr. Mashaba, from your perspective, what comes to mind, just in a short, brief nutshell, what comes to mind when you hear the words ethical leadership?
Well, I think, Lerato and Reverend Matibula, I'm awed by what I've just really listened to, because I think, for me, with my own personal upbringing, because I always like to really use my life as a point of reference, because it's something that I can actually relate to, and people sometimes find it I don't know what, when I actually give reference to my grandfather, who I meant everything to. This was an uneducated old man. He was a security guard for the Harankua municipality, the man standing at the gate when everybody goes in and out. He used to come home in Amanskral once a month, and I meant everything to him. Every time when he was around, everyone in the community knew he was around, and I meant everything to him. And the things that Reverend Matibula just shared with me, it is like I was talking to my grandfather from the really early stage of my life, instilling the sense of ethical leadership, things that he believes are needed to adhere to really be successful in life, not to really look at what in the township lingo we call double up. You know, I always tell people about where I was born and raised. We used to believe in double up. Double up is shortcuts. We always want to achieve something today, not worried about tomorrow. And I think for me, I was taught my grandfather, you know, today I've already had a meal, like this evening, I had a great lunch this afternoon. Do I need my dinner? Probably have something like, my concern is tomorrow, because today I'm fine. And I think if we don't really think like that, unfortunately, a society like that is bound to fade. If we are going to really be the society that looks after, think about tomorrow, I mean, for today, don't think about tomorrow, that nation has got absolutely no chance whatsoever of ever actually making it. And I think I'm really so grateful listening to Reverend Matibula. It's like, honestly, I can just really listen to him for the next 2 hours.
Well, we don't have time. We're not going to do that. But I'm sure all of South Africa watching right now can concur with you. Just briefly, Ndate Mashaba, because I want to get into the meat of Reverend Matebula's remarks. Why did you convene this webinar? Just in case, you know, people missed it, our viewers missed it in your opening remarks. I mean, why do you think that we needed to have a reverend here, a Christian reverend at that, to have this conversation?
I think, you know, Lerato, I started getting concerned with the development of our democratic process. Early stages of our democracy, hardly 10 years, where I started seeing the moral compass of South Africa actually decaying, families breaking up, no morality, and so forth. Remember, at one stage, even President Mbeki established what we call the Moral Regeneration Project. Already, I think all of us as South Africans, were raising this issue about the morality of the South African nation. Unfortunately, today, it's actually even worse than by the time when we discovered that we are on a wrong path in terms of morality. And obviously, for some reason, because of my privileged position, I decided to really take politics to really be the route I can pay back to society, because I was born in poverty.
You need to unmute Ndate Mashaba.
I took a decision at the early stage of my life that the PW board is not going to determine my destiny. I'm going to be the man in charge. From the teachings of my grandfather. That's when I went into business, against all odds. But all the time looking, and before obviously going into business, what was important for me was to stabilize my life. You can imagine growing up with no parents around, naughty boys and stuff like that. And I realized, you know what, to go into business with this chaotic life, no chance of ever succeeding. So before actually going into business, the decision I took was that, Herman, get married so that you can stabilize your life. Because it's very important, because I was not just really looking at business success, I was really looking at the future. Got married. I got married, then bought a car, and after buying a car, resigned from my normal work. I worked for a salary 30 months in my life. And if I look at now, in a week's time, I'll be married for 39 years. And if I look at the role that my family has played in this journey, and I look at how South Africa and the world has treated me, and obviously at this time when you're seeing your country collapsing, you can't just sit back and say, it is not my responsibility. It's someone's responsibility. And I said, if it's not me, who then? That's when I then took a decision. But I realized for us, for a political system to succeed, it requires morality. It needs ethical leadership. It needs values. And that's when I said, we as politicians would not really be able to sort this matter out on our own. Let us involve religious people to assist us deal with this matter, because church and religion, if you look at all the faiths all over the world over the last many years, they've played such a crucial role in stabilizing societies. And I believe we as South Africa, we're at that stage where we need divine intervention. And I'm really so grateful that today, starting this webinar with the Christian faith, and we'll be engaging the Muslim, the Hindus and the Jewish. And if there are others, we invite them, let us engage so that we can find ways of coexistence. Because one thing that I've also had a privilege over the years.
Mr. Mashaba, you are now taking over the Reverend's job. You know, Reverends cannot stop speaking to us. Reverend, I'm hoping that you're going to help me check Mr. Mashaba on this one, because you see that he's taking over your job. I want to bring the Reverend in on this one. You know, Mr. Mashaba speaks a lot about this morality, you know, and people can get their skin up when they think of the word. From the Christian faith, as a leader of a Christian church, what is morality according to the Christian faith?
Well, morality, we simply says in Zulu city, ukuyiphatha. You know, these are the basic thing, the way of handling yourself. You know, it is a common thing. Let me tell you, by nature, we know that a dog barks. You know, that's what a dog do. When a dog barks at you, you cannot be surprised, because that is the dog. So there are things that are expected, you know, from a human being. For an example, is that you're not supposed to take someone's property by force. You know, that is not ethical. You cannot steal. That is not ethical. But unfortunately, we are living in a society now. It's like stealing has made other people to become heroes. They compete about that. You know, who is the greatest criminal in the country? It's like we hero worship those people. No. And then when we speak of ethics, we speak of character. You know, we speak of you having boundaries, you having principles, you knowing that this is not my thing, this is my neighbor's thing. So if it is not mine, I must respect that. I must get a permission before I can take something. Those are morals. Morals simply means that.
So basically, it's knowing what is right and what is wrong to do.
Exactly.
And I want to bring in something a little bit more controversial for the both of you to respond to. I'm very mindful of time because, again, as at the beginning, as I said, this is such a loaded conversation. But I want to pack in as much as we can in the next 20 minutes that we have left together. If we can try and keep it as concise as possible, I know it's very difficult to do. But would you not say, between the two of you, some might say that you're muddying the waters, right? South Africa is a secular state, constitutionally speaking, that we don't mix. There's a clear separation of church and state. The two of you are on two sides of that. Mashaba is a politician. You are a reverend and a leader of the Christian faith in your church. What do you think about this? Why did you, well, let me start with you, Reverend. Why did you accept an invitation from a political party like this?
I think we need to clear that thinking that a church or people of the church, they are not supposed to get into politics. I don't know who came up with that. That is a totally wrong conception. Because when you check in the scriptures, you've got people like Daniel. Daniel was involved with the government of the day. He made the government of the day to be a better government. Joseph in the scripture, he made the government of the day, Egypt, to become the strongest nation during his time. I can go on and on. David himself, he became the king. He brought moral stability, great, leadership in the nation. For me, if we're gonna allow people of morals, people, with integrity, people with values, just to be a good boy and a good girl in the church, who's gonna fix your country for you? Because every decision that has been made, it is made politically. I'm speaking to you tonight. Churches have been closed. What type of a decision was that? It was taken politically. So everything that is done, when they increase tax, it is politically, and both Christians and those who are not in the church, we pay the tax. We use the same petrol. So you cannot say Christians or those in the religious sector, they're supposed to distance themselves from politics. That it is totally wrong. As a matter of fact, those who are in the church, they are supposed to be at the lead. We had Desmond Tutu. He was the one who was in the lead, and he has done that. So I want to encourage everybody to do that. There's nothing wrong with what is happening tonight.
Mashaba, you agree with that?
More than agree. It is for that reason thought of actually involving our religious leadership with this intervention, because without them, we are not going to really be a society that we invest to be. Because I think the people who would obviously want to silence us, normally, one of the issues that Reverend raised here is to allow other people to take over your life. They determine for you who you must be, how you must think, how you must sleep, how you must walk, and so forth. So I think we must be very careful as human beings. If we allow other people to take over our own personal liberties, then we are a nation that is in big trouble. I think all of us as human beings, God created us to really be free human beings. But that freedom has to really operate within the confines of respecting other people around you, and cannot really be silent and allow other people to determine who you are.
That's very interesting, and I'm going to come back to that, because I need a little bit of more discussion around the role of the church in politics or in the political space. The question I want to ask you, Reverend, you mentioned so many examples of titans. You mentioned the scientists who were sacrificial in their choices for the next generation. And of course, I don't think any of us can disagree that we're not in that same kind of space as we speak right now in South Africa and the world and globally. Where did we go wrong? What do you think got us where we are now? Why do we not have the leaders, the types of leaders that you mentioned in your remarks?
Greed, two things for me. It is greed and the lack of vision and the lack of compassion. You see, if you can lose those three things, you don't have a vision, you are greedy, and then you don't have compassion, you cannot become a leader. A leader, it is somebody with a vision, it is somebody with compassion, and then it is somebody who is selfless. And then to those who are not leaders, they've got the opposite of that. They are greedy, they're thinking about their own stomach, they don't care how many people, are hurting at the end of the day. Look at the billions and the billions that we are losing in this nation. Because people, they can't think of the future. They can't think about the next generation. How many children, how many schools would have built with the money that is stolen every day? How many hospitals would have built with the money that has been stolen every day? So we have gone wrong by allowing greed to consume us, to a point that our stomach has become so big, to a point that we can't even see the way, and we can't feel even our heartbeat for those who are in need. That is the problem, of many leaders today.
Is it your submission then that South Africa is a visionless nation, given the leaders that you've just described?
Well, I'm allowed to say that generally, but not everybody. But a nation that it is succeeding, it is because of a vision, visionary leadership. I can mention few countries. Some of them, they are younger than us. Their democracy, it is so young. I mean, you look at, now Dubai, Singapore, and then those are some of the countries that had a strong leadership. And if you don't have visionaries, remember, those who lack vision, they only see here. They cannot see tomorrow. When they're in power, they just want to eat for today, because they think, actually, I usually put it like this, they've got a poverty mentality. You know what does poverty mentality does? It makes somebody to think there's not enough money. So if I'm in power, let me just steal, because if I don't steal, I might actually lose an opportunity. Not understanding that there is enough money and resources that we can supply and have a better country. It is a shame and the disgrace that South Africa, we are where we are with a lot of people who are so poor with all these minerals, the resources, the gold, the diamonds, the fertile ground, all the wisdom and everything that we have. It is a disgrace. But on top of that, it is because we lack visionary leadership and people of compassion and people, you know, and then who are selfless.
How do we get it back? Mr. Mashaba, how do we get it back? Anyone can you can tell me, Reverend. How do we get it back?
Mashaba comes in. We have a saying that says charity begins at home. We need to start right at home. In Zulu, it is very important right now where we are. Every parent, make sure that you teach principles to your children. Unfortunately, today our parenting, it is no longer parenting. We allow gadgets, you know, cell phone to raise our children. We are so busy to a point that we don't have time for our children, and our children, they are being raised by television and by social media. And whatever they see, that becomes a role model. But I strongly believe if we can start at home as parents, teach our children right morals. You don't steal sugar, because if they start by stealing sugar, tomorrow it's going to be a 5 rand. Next day it's going to be a car. Next time it's going to be somebody killing somebody else. We start at home. And not that only, we also have mentors. We begin with the mentorship programs. We go to these schools right at school, primary level. I've written a book now. It is called Devoted Citizen. Let's teach our children while they are still young. You need to become a devoted citizen. When a traffic light is red, it simply means you need to stop. When there's a barrier line, the barrier line simply means you don't overtake, you know, because you cannot see what is happening on the other side. But the problem is we don't have these basic things. We need to start now at school, begin to mentor other people with our friends. Let's hold them accountable. When they do something wrong, let us not be quiet. Confront that. You know, when somebody is throwing a paper, he's littering. You know, this is what I do all the time. If somebody's littering next to me, I call them. I said, why are you doing that? Take that piece of paper, put it in the rubbish bin, because we have accepted the mediocre as a part of our lifestyle. We don't hold one another accountable. It begins with me to your brother as a sister, and then we do that, we hold one another. But mentorship and holding one another accountable, it is the key moving forward.
Wow, that is really lots of food for thought. Mr. Mashaba, this one is going to be quite packed for you. I mean, in his remarks, the Reverend spoke about an ethical leader being that person who does not conform, does not follow a group. I mean, we live in a country where we live by the creed of majority rule. How do you balance the two in a space like this one, where politically it can be really charged? What would you say would be the way in which we can govern and make this thing happen in terms of the ability of each individual person not to conform when we live by the creed of a majority rule?
You know, I've really been extremely fortunate by the teachings of my grandfather not to conform. I think if you go to Haramudze village where I was born, I've never really been one falling under group mentality. I take responsibility. I've been taught every decision that I take it myself. I can never at any point in time blame Lerato for the mistake that I've made. As much as Lerato gave me that advice, but ultimately I'm the one who has consumed that information, and I make the decision, not really based on your advice. Yes, your advice was critical, but ultimately I make that decision. And unfortunately, I live in a society where people have been taught to actually think like slaves, to think like we are victims. Every time with Lerato, anything happens to you, you get involved in a car accident, it's not your mistake. You go and slaughter a cow or whatever, or you go to someone to go and really pray for you. I'm saying is, I think if people can take personal responsibility for their lives, and accept the fact that life is not perfect. I always say life has never been perfect the last 2,000-3,000 years ago. Life is not perfect today. And I can tell you in another 100 years, life is going to be even more difficult. Why is it going to be more difficult? Because if you look at the world population, it's growing at a phenomenal rate. Just when I was born, the world population was roughly just under 4 billion. Today, we have 7 billion people. But the world resources, unfortunately, they are shrinking. So what we need to do on a daily basis, make sure that we can actually use this God-given brains to navigate the challenges that we encounter on a daily basis.
But I want to make it a little bit more practical. I mean, Reverend, help us out here. We live in a political climate where people do get threatened. You know, their lives get threatened. If you go against the grain, if you go against what the party has decided, if you go against the decision that we're making, if you go against our ability to cover anything up, you know, people do have to consider all of those things. What advice would you give somebody who is really surrounded or in an organization that is behaving in particular ways, and they are genuinely, as a human being, they are genuinely an ethical person, they want to do the right thing? What advice would you give for them to get the courage to be able to do that which is right?
Yeah, I think let me start by saying, you know, for years now, we have allowed wrong model or wrong role model to continue to rise, to be celebrated, while great people in our society, they were never celebrated, they were never honored. So today, our community, you know, it is full of those people, you know, who have been going astray, the drug, you know, dealers, and they've been celebrated by our young people to a point that, you know, those who are doing things in a proper way, the moment when they want to rise or voice out, it's like they are being threatened. I strongly believe, let's start now, we must never shrink when it comes to this. When we discover, which is what we do as devoted citizens, you know, what we do, we discover people who are doing a good work in this country. We honor them, we celebrate them in public so that our community can see that there are people who are doing a great thing, and we celebrate them in public. And I strongly believe that we need to unite, you know, especially those who want to see morals, you know, ethics being promoted. When somebody who's exercising morals and ethical leadership being attacked, we need to rise and stand and defend those people. Even the lawyers, those who are believing, you know, in ethical leaders, the business people who are believing in ethical leadership, when somebody who stands for values, we need to sponsor them. We need to stand and protect them, even in the high court. You know, let them know that they are surrounded by good people. But you know what we do? As they say, the saying goes, you know, this land or this country or the world continues to get corrupt because the good people are doing nothing. It is time for the good people to rise so that they can defeat evil. If we are quiet, evil will continue to go up and will be swallowed by it. I refuse to be, you know, and for somebody to shut me down. I will speak even if I have to go to the grave. That was the leadership of Nelson Mandela. Even when they offered him to say, we can release you out of prison, you know, earlier, he refused. He said, I'm not gonna compromise until my people, they get what they deserve. The problem is that we love compromising. We are so scared. A leader must be prepared to lay down his life for the sake of others. If you are full of fear that you are scared of dying as a leader, that is not leadership. Leadership is sacrifice. I said to you, it takes sacrifice to dig the gold under the ground. And today we are enjoying this gold, you know, as our earrings, as our rings, because somebody had to sacrifice. Leadership is sacrifice. If we have to die, so let it be. But it will be known that there are people who stood for the truth and for the sake of the next generation.
You know, Lerato, let me just really come in here regarding what's really happening in our country. Fortunate enough, throughout my life, I've never really been scared of criminals. Because if I'd allowed criminals to scare me, I would not really be the man I am today. I make it really very clear that I will never be bullied by the next person. If you've got to kill me, you'd rather kill me. Because once you can obviously take away my personal pride and dignity, you've destroyed me as a human being. Why must I then live? I have no reason to live. That is why I believe and I support what the Reverend is saying, that men of stature, good men and women, need to stand up and not really be afraid, to make sure that you can really have that seat for tomorrow. Because if we are going to be afraid, you are going to be silenced. And what are the consequences? Your country will ultimately be taken over by criminal syndicates. Because if you look at South Africa right now, we are almost at a stage where we are run by criminal syndicates. If we allow this to continue for another 5-6 years, I can tell you South Africa will collapse. South Africa will be run by gangs. We will need to really have armored cars to take our kids to school. We will have to really provide our own security. We have to build our own schools. We'll be a nation of cowards. And what will happen? The criminal syndicates will control our lives. We've got to stand up now before it's too late.
Lerato, can I come in?
Please.
Just before you go for another question. You know, the thing that I'm scared of, the thing that I'm concerned about, is that when I am 70 and my grandchildren ask me to say, Grandpa, how did we arrive to this? Why South Africa is like this? What is it that you did? Or what is it that we have not done to be where we are? I wonder what will be my answer. I don't want to live with regrets. I will stand for my children. I will stand for my country. I will stand, to make sure that this country becomes a better country for all of us, both white and black, because that is what we need in this nation, not just for ourselves, but for the sake of the next generation.
So how do we do it? Practically, we've got 5 minutes. How do we do it? We wake up tomorrow, the three of us, we need whole societal change. We've got different religious affiliations. We've got different persuasions, political persuasions. What is it that is going to get the entire country that is South Africa to say, if in fact we're going to be led, irrespective of who is sitting in high office, what kind of character, what kind of person needs to lead us going forward? How do we get that process going? Just quickly, between the two of you in 5 minutes.
Can I come in quickly? I strongly believe that this is the time when we need to say, I love the slogan that says, Kinako. It begins with me. South Africans, they need to come to a point where they say, if we are going to have a better country, it begins with me. As a father, it begins with me. Let me treat my wife properly. Let me treat my children in a proper way. As parents, let me educate my children. As a citizen, let me take a responsibility. Let me voice out. If the time for voting comes, it does not help to say, I'm going to stay at home and not vote, because even if you don't vote, your vote counts. For the mere fact that you did not vote, you've actually voted. It is time for South Africans to take responsibility, to vote for men and women that they believe that they are going to make this country a better country, not just for themselves, but for the great nation and the future. And listen to me, most of the time, politicians, and I'm just general about this, politicians, they think about the next elections. But ethical leaders, they think about the next generation. It is not about the vote. It's about the next generation. If we are going out there and vote, we need to think about the people who are going to take this country to the next level for the benefit and the betterment of this nation. That will be my closing remarks.
Mr. Mashaba?
Lerato, I think I want South Africans to really know that what we are discussing today is not an event. It's a journey. It's a journey that's going to take at least 20 years. If we begin today, we start actually with the foundation today. The only time we'll be able to really reap the fruits of what we are doing, you're talking about at least 20 years. At least 20 years. And I think that's something that people must understand. So I think we need to get together as South Africans. Firstly, because we live in a democratic dispensation, we cannot go back to dictatorial kind of governments. So the only way we've got to do is it's going to start with you. Look at yourself in the mirror as a South African to say, what role can I really play? For you to stay away from voting, unfortunately, you are perpetuating this suffering. You are perpetuating this criminality. You are failing not just your children, you're failing your grandchildren, because at the end of the day, you've given your power to someone else, because he said to you, you are nothing. Because people who actually don't go out and vote, they, as far as they're concerned, they see themselves as nothing, because they've been brought up in that environment to undermine themselves as human beings, as an individual. I think, and I hope that South Africans can wake up to that fact that all of us, the 60 plus million South Africans, all of us are important, whether you are unemployed or employed, whether you're a millionaire or a multi-billionaire. The day when you go out and vote, that's the day when you get an opportunity to be equal, all of us as South Africans of a voting age.
Reverend, do you think South Africa has an appetite for what we're talking about?
Well, they need to be taught. There are a lot of, they are so discouraged. Many South Africans, they've been observing, and then they've been disappointed. They've been promised a lot of things by politicians year in and year out. You know, let me tell you, just yesterday, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, we've got a woman who has been waiting for over 25 years for a house. We built that house for that lady. You know, just last week we handed over that house. When you sit with this woman, she says, I'm not gonna vote. And I was telling her, you need to begin to vote. But what I've discovered is that a lot of people, they are so disappointed. And then they've taken a back seat. They are less interested about the politics. And then that is why right now we need people who are going to be honest. We also need to revive the South Africans. We also need to encourage them. We must find out ways of speaking to them, you know, as much as we do these things before elections, but we must teach them. We must go to the schools. We must go into these community places, encourage them. Let's build this culture once again, you know, of becoming devoted citizens. Love your country, build your country for yourself and for the next generation. They are not there yet, but somebody has to take that role and encourage them to do so. And it is up to all of us who are here tonight to do exactly this. And those out there and then who are listening to this broadcast tonight, that it is up to us to revive them and to encourage them.
Well, there you have it, South Africa. You have heard what the Reverend has said. We are speaking tonight about ethical leadership, particularly from the Christian perspective. I think that we didn't really take it there. I think we're talking about humanity this evening. I think we're talking about love for country and what we need to do to get our country back on track. I thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is the first, as I said, of a 4-part series. Next week, we will be talking to the Muslim faith. Remember that we are a multiplicity of a country, multiple cultured country, and we want everybody to have a voice. This is definitely not about upholding one religion over the other. It is about all of us starting a process where South Africans can finally agree together as to what it is. If we talk about vision, what kind of character, of person, of leader is going to get us there? How is it that we do checks and balances on their character? If they are making decisions that do not serve us and benefit us as society, sometimes waiting for those elections 2.5 years later or 5 years later can sometimes be quite costly. And so we want this process for people who run for high office to know that in fact South Africans themselves will check you out by way of character. And we invite you to join us once again next week for another installment of this webinar series. My name is Lerato Ngobeni, and I have been your host this evening, and I thank you so very much. Please do visit us at www.actionsa.org.za. Thank you, Reverend, and thank you, Mr. Mashaba.